All right, good morning, everyone. Mike Montefusco from the National Weather Service in Wakefield, Virginia. This is our weekly Monday briefing for the week of September 23rd, 2024. Let's get started with our highlights. Generally unsettled weather through the midweek period with scattered showers and storms each day. We've got seasonable high temperatures this week, generally in the mid 70s to around 80 degrees, kind of trending back above average for the latter portion of the week into the weekend. As far as winds go, that persistent east to northeast wind for the early week time frame, along with the long period swell and the harvest moon cycle that's ongoing, that full moon, is going to keep tides above normal for the next few days, with high swells kind of lingering and keeping our tide levels above normal through the week ahead. Generally minor to moderate coastal flooding is going to continue, unfortunately, over the next couple of days, gradually improving as you get into the latter portion of this week. As far as coastal flood hazards, we do have coastal flood warnings that are continuing across much of eastern Virginia, including the tidal Potomac and the eastern shore of Virginia, the Virginia Beach area, as well as the northern Outer Banks and the Bayside portion of the Maryland Eastern Shore. Coastal flood advisories with slightly lower tidal anomalies are ongoing along the eastern shore of Maryland on the Atlantic side, and then from the West Point on the tidal Rappahannock into the Norfolk and Chesapeake areas as well. With those persistent east to northeast swells, we are going to be looking at rip currents remaining an issue over the next couple of days, and those rip current issues will be ongoing, at least in elevated form, as we continue through this week. And lastly, we are going to be looking at low pressure in the Caribbean that will likely have some further tropical development over the next couple of days, which we will talk about in the next couple of slides with respect to what could potentially be tropical cyclone Helene as we get into the latter portion of this week. As far as the marine goes, we are looking at small craft advisories that remain in place along the Atlantic coastal waters, again, for that dangerous surf conditions and dangerous water levels, 5 to 7 foot seas ongoing with that onshore flow and that swell. State overview of the ongoing coastal flood hazards along the coast. In the darker green, we do have coastal flood warnings. In the lighter green, we do have the coastal flood advisories that are ongoing. With respect to the weather pattern ahead, generally unsettled weather through midweek with scattered showers and storms each day. Generally more widespread tomorrow into tomorrow night across our region. That weak front will remain generally to our west and northwest through midweek, and then approaching, slowly dropping into the area later Thursday and Friday. That ongoing onshore flow, once again, is going to continue to create problems in the way of minor to locally moderate coastal flooding impacts through midweek. Gradual improvement only as we get into the latter portion of this week. Unfortunately, our tides are going to remain an issue over the next couple of days. And lastly, obviously, we are going to continue to monitor low pressure in the Caribbean Sea that will continue to move northward into the southern Gulf by Tuesday. In terms of expected rainfall, we are looking at precipitation amounts generally on the order of 1/4 to 1/2 an inch for the I-95 corridor and points westward over the next few days. Locally higher amounts possible across the US 15 corridor from Louisa down to Farmville and western portions of Mecklenburg and Lunenburg counties as well. But for the most part, lighter amounts along the coast from eastern Virginia, eastern shore of Maryland, and northeast North Carolina, into the basically the northern neck areas as well. Rainfall amounts a little bit lighter in those areas, 1/4 inch to 1/10 of an inch just inland to less than 1/10 of an inch along the coast, with just some spottier light showers possible each day. Rainfall over the next 7 days, the majority of this, especially to the west, is going to be with our developing tropical system, potentially for the mid to latter portions of the week. So that's, again, mainly to be to our west and southwest through the majority of the week ahead, which we're going to talk about in a couple of slides here. But locally, again, you can see the heavier amounts along and west of I-95 through the midweek timeframe. Regional forecast summary in terms of temperatures, you're generally looking at near to above normal, especially as you get into the latter portion of the week into the weekend, generally looking at improving warming temperatures, I should say, as we get into the latter portion of the week into the weekend, remaining near or above normal temperature-wise. For your lows, fairly similar, with lows remaining in the upper 60s to low 70s across the region. Potentially a little bit cooler with a cold front dropping through the region next weekend and into early next week, but that is a ways off. But we do kind of trend a little bit cooler, suffice it to say, as we get into the latter portions of this week and the next week. Going to remain unsettled in terms of probability of precipitation, and you can see just a lot of green on this probability of precipitation map. Generally, just unsettled in the way of precipitation. No real heavy amounts on the horizon locally for the time being. Some locally heavier rainfall possible inland portions of the area, mainly west of Richmond. Again, we talked about the US 15 corridor from Louisa down to Farmville and potentially into Lunenburg, Mecklenburg counties. But for the most part, just kind of scattered showers and remaining unsettled through the midweek time frame. In terms of wind probabilities on the marine side, generally quiet, generally just hazardous seas, as you'll see in the next slide. But small craft conditions, really not really much of an issue with respect to wind over the next 7 days. But that marine threat potential does manifest when you look at the hazardous seas graphic, as you can see here, the Atlantic coast. From Fenwick Island all the way down to Currituck Beach Light, looking at just increasing seas remaining elevated through the next 5 days with that persistent east to southeast swell, just kind of keeping that long period swell moving and that wave energy moving in and keeping our seas elevated through the week ahead. Once again, on the marine threat graphic, you can see the onshore flow is going to continue east-northeast for the first part of the week, east-southeast for the second portion of the week. Small craft advisories remaining in place for that dangerous wave heights or sea heights through the week, remaining generally 5 to 7 feet through the week ahead. Gradual improvement by late week, but it will take a while, unfortunately. On the marine side, again, you can see remaining 4 to 6 feet on the Atlantic coast, 1 to 2 feet in the bay and in the eastern Virginia rivers and the Currituck Sound. So remaining on the lower side there, but that wave energy, long period swell, will keep our waves elevated along the coast. Wind speed side, once again, you can see just winds remaining out of the east-northeast early this week, turning east-southeast for the latter portion of the week, increasing a little bit this weekend, but as it appears right now, remaining sub-small craft with respect to wind. The tidal overview remains an issue. Unfortunately, you get into the tidal flood pattern, and unfortunately what you're going to see is these tide levels are going to remain elevated for the next couple of days. And as you get into certainly tomorrow night, that minor to locally moderate is going to continue. And then gradual improvement, only gradual improvement Wednesday, Thursday with respect to nuisance tide levels going back towards minor across our northern upper bay zones and the tidal Rappahannock and the tidal Potomac rivers, gradually easing as you get into Thursday. Just stepping through the individual tide sites here, you're looking at the Crisfield and Windmill Point and Louisetta, just kind of looking at gradual improvement here. Again, the next couple tide cycles will be rough. Once again, Crisfield, Windmill Point, Louisetta, just kind of looking at those tidal anomalies only gradually easing next couple of tide cycles. So that moderate coastal flood impact period, once again during the astronomically higher tide cycles during the afternoon and early evening, will continue to be an issue next couple of days. The lower of the two daily tide cycles will still be elevated in minor coastal flood impacts, but still a little bit better. But in terms of improving impacts, it won't be until the latter portion of the week until we get into that improvement in the upper bay. Lower bay, it comes a little bit faster in terms of that improvement, but it will remain elevated through midweek. minor to locally moderate coastal flood impacts continuing in the lower bay from Kip to Peak over to the Bay Bridge Tunnel, Yorktown area, even back into the tidal James River, where those impacts continue through midweek. Again, gradual improvement through the late week time frame. And on the ocean side, on the Atlantic coast, a little bit faster improvement, but still, you're going to have persistent elevated tide levels through the week ahead. Generally minor coastal flooding impacts through midweek during the times of high tide. And then by the end of the week, we do gradually start to improve things with our water levels slowly returning back towards normal, albeit remaining elevated. In terms of the rip current forecast, that wave action and the onshore flow is going to continue those rip current risks through midweek. By the late week period, we do start to drop back towards moderate, but remaining at least high to moderate through the week ahead. So for those interests, certainly keep things advised that we'll be remaining elevated through the week ahead here. As far as the tropical weather outlook, we continue to monitor low pressure in the Caribbean Sea with respect to Invest 97L. You're going to start to see this being labeled as a potential tropical system, likely in the next couple of cycles. You go to look at the GFS images and what we have with the European ensemble. And basically what you're looking at as you go through this period is this tropical system will continue to move into the southern Gulf of Mexico over the next couple of days, and it's going to be forced north between our ridge off the southeast coast and our digging upper trough over the mid-south, and that's going to have to basically kind of shoot the gap in between the two here. And as we get into the late week period, you are going to start to see some impacts along the Gulf Coast, certainly interests from the Louisiana coast all the way towards the Key West area, Southwest Florida, all interests in between there. Certainly continue to monitor this system, which could potentially be Tropical Cyclone Helene before too much longer. Certainly watch that. But for locally, certainly that system will start to lift along the Gulf Coast and then track certainly north to northwest at some point for the late week time frame, which keeps a lot of the rain from that system. Again, as you saw in the QPF graphic from our colleagues over at WPC, a lot of that QPF will generally remain to our west and southwest for the most part. But we are looking at the potential for some increasing rain chances over our area as we get into Friday, into next weekend. So certainly, bear that in mind. And as you look at the ERO from our colleagues out of WPC, you can certainly see by day 3 on Wednesday, starting to increase things across the deep south, across the I-10 corridor from the Gulf Coast back into the deep south. You can see start to increase a little bit on Thursday, and then on Friday that continues across the southeast back into the Ozarks as well. So, just kind of persistent heavier rains remaining to our west and southwest. So we're going to have to watch this system as it gets further evolved into the weekend. But through Friday, at the very minimum, we are looking at lower chances for rain over our region. We're going to continue to monitor it. And I certainly would like to have you do that as well on your end of things. But through the next 96 hours, impacts over the next few days, generally to be mainly to our south and southwest with respect to the heavy rainfall from this system. Going back to the rest of the briefing here, looking to the week ahead, temperatures remaining seasonable to above seasonable over the next several days. Temperatures generally in the upper 70s to low 80s across the region, so fairly high confidence that we're going to remain seasonable to above normal temperature-wise with respect to temperature. And then with that tropical system lingering, and then as that closed low kind of gets stuck over the mid-south, that kind of Rex pattern kind of resets up where we have drier to the west, more moisture over the south and southeast portions of the country. Will remain in that above normal rainfall outlook as well through that time frame as we get into next week. Once again, those highlights remaining unsettled through midweek. with scattered showers and storms each day. Again, I don't think a lot in the way of heavier rainfall to be had across our area, except potentially at times over the Piedmont portions of our area west of Richmond. US 15 corridor from Louisa down to Farmville and down that way. Potentially some locally heavier showers in that range. Otherwise, just kind of remaining unsettled with scattered showers each day. Onshore flow persists through much of the week ahead. That long period swell and wave action is going to keep our tides elevated through the week ahead. Worst of it will be the next couple of days. Gradual improvement, very slow improvement for the mid to latter portion of the week. Coastal flood warnings continue along the coast of eastern Virginia and the tidal Potomac, as well as much of the Virginia eastern shore. Coastal flood advisories for the remainder of the area. The Atlantic coast of the Maryland eastern shore, the tidal Rappahannock, the Norfolk and Chesapeake areas. Also, dangerous swells and rip conditions are going to keep our rip risk in the high to moderate category through much of this week. And we will continue to monitor that Caribbean system that will likely move into the southeastern portion of the United States later this week. So continue to keep an eye on that through the Hurricane Center. In our briefings, we will keep you apprised of the latest. And on the marine side, small craft advisories remain in effect, at least through midweek, with those elevated seas. That's all we have for our weekly briefing today. Thank you so much for dialing in this morning. Appreciate you participating. Have a great day and have a great week ahead. We will talk to you more at the end of the week. Thanks so much.